Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is Left Bank Books welcomes non-binary abolitionist and organizer Deshaun Harrison, who will discuss their highly anticipated new book, Belly of the Beast, The Politics of Anti-Fatness as Anti-Blackness. Tonight, Harrison will be in conversation with acclaimed poet and finalist for the National Book Award, Danez Smith. And if you are in St. Louis, you know that we are experiencing the beginning of a storm, so I do apologize if there are any connection issues that happen during this event, but hopefully we will just continue without any interruption. Left Bank Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore. We would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Deshaun and Danez, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore. We offer curbside pickup and delivery to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. We have opened our doors so you can come in and find this incredible book on display at the front of our store. We are very happy to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and bring in new thoughts to make the world a better place. We hope that you enjoy this event, and we hope that you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a copy for you or for all of your friends at left-bank.com. Purchasing a copy of the book from Left Bank Books allows us to keep our bookstore and staff operating, and it also allows us to keep this event series going. So thank you for your support. I am Shane Mullen. I am the events coordinator for Left Bank Books. I help produce our hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We will be taking questions from you, the audience, at the end of the event, but you can type your questions as a comment at any point in time throughout the event. And be sure to follow Left Bank Books on Facebook and YouTube to be notified about all of our fantastic virtual events. Our September and August are packed with fantastic events for readers of all ages. Now, about tonight's book, Belly of the Beast, The Politics of Anti-Fatness as Anti-Blackness. Exploring the intersections of blackness, gender, fatness, health, and the violence of policing. To live in a body both fat and black is to exist at the margins of a society that creates the conditions for anti-fatness as anti-blackness. Hyper-policed by state and society, passed over for housing and jobs, and derided and misdiagnosed by medical professionals, fat black people in the United States are subject to sociopolitically sanctioned discrimination, abuse, condescension, and trauma. In Belly of the Beast, Deshaun Harrison, a fat black, disabled, and non-binary trans writer, offers an incisive, fresh, and precise exploration of anti-fatness as anti-blackness. They foreground the state-sanctioned murders of fat black men and trans and non-binary masculine people in historical analysis. Policing, disenfranchisement, and invisibilizing of fat black men and trans and non-binary masculine people are pervasive, insidious ways that anti-fat, anti-blackness shows up in everyday life. Fat people can be legally fired in 49 states for being fat. They're more likely to be houseless. Fat people die at higher rates for misdiagnosis or nontreatment. Fat women are more likely to be sexually assaulted. And at the intersections of fatness, blackness, disability, and gender, these abuses are exacerbated. Taking on desirability politics, the limitations of gender, the connection between anti-fatness and carcerality, and the incongruity of health and healthiness for the black fat, Harrison viscerally and vividly illustrates the myriad harms of anti-fat, anti-blackness. They offer strategies for dismantling denial, unlearning the cultural programming that tells us fat is bad, and destroying the world as we know it, so the black fat can inhabit a place not built on their subjugation. Kiese Lehman, the author of Heavy, an American memoir, says, "This modern classic relishes in collapsing conventional and cliched orthodoxies. As formative as Harrison's proclamations are, it is Harrison's pacing that gives the book the lingering feeling of the most sensual whisper." And Sabrina Strings, the author of Fearing the Black Body, The Racial Origins of Fat Phobia, says, "Belly of the Beast is written with poise and lucidity. It pushes us to think past the peplum of telling fat folks all they got to do is love themselves to enacting a movement that addresses the source and ramifications of societal anti-fatness as anti-blackness. Harrison forces us not to look away, reminding us that all too often health and desire are used to annul Blackness. In a post-BOPO world, desire and the sheer right to life can be rooted in something other than all the things, named non-Black. And now about tonight's speakers. Deshaun Harrison is a non-binary abolitionist and community organizer based out of Atlanta, Georgia. They once served as the communications director of #ATLisReady and editor-in-chief of Queer Black Millennial. Harrison now holds the honor of being the associate editor of Wear Your Voice magazine and lead organizer of Solutions Not Punishment Collaborative. Harrison has also traveled throughout the United States and abroad to lecture at conferences and colleges and to lead workshops focused on race, sexuality, gender, class, religion, disabilities, fatness, and the intersection at which they all meet. You can find them on Twitter and Instagram at DeshaunLH or through their website, DeshaunHarrison.com. And tonight they will be in conversation with Danez Smith. Danez is the author of 3 collections, including Homie and Don't Call Us Dead. They have won the Forward Prize for Best Collection, the Minnesota Book Award in Poetry, the Kate Tufts Discovery Award, and have been a finalist for the NAACP Image Award in Poetry, the National Book Critics Circle Award, and the National Book Award. Danez's poetry and prose have been featured in Vanity Fair, The New York Times, The New Yorker, GQ, Best American Poetry, and on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Danez is a member of the Dark Noise Collective and is the co-host of the podcast VS with Franny Choi. They live in Minneapolis near their people. And now, without further ado, if you would please help me in welcoming our fantastic guests for the evening, Deshaun Harrison and Danez Smith. Hello.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Shane. Thank you so much.
We have a great crowd that is here weathering the storm if they are in St. Louis with us and ready to hear more about this incredible book.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for everyone who's watching. And thank you to Danez for agreeing to be my conversation partner tonight. I'm really excited. So thank you.
Yes, thank y'all. Love to all y'all out there in St. Louis. I've been in a St. Louis, Missouri rainstorm. It ain't no joke. So praying for y'all. But I know that whether you're in St. Louis or just wherever you are, alongside of me, you are so excited to be here to celebrate Deshaun and their new book, Belly of the Beast. Mine is in a box over there right now because I'm like moving like tomorrow. But so I got my little. Okay, I'm gonna wiggle my ebook like I could wiggle my real copy, because I'm so excited to have it. But such a beautiful book, Deshaun. Such an important addition to the bricks that we're building in these new foundations in a new world beyond all this bullshit, or at least a brick that we're gonna throw to help get us there.
Period.
But before you read for us, I just want to know, your book just came out. We're like 2 days in. Just came out Tuesday. How are you feeling? How are you sitting in this moment? What's going on with you, new writer, debut writer?
It feels good. I feel like, it feels very different. Obviously, I feel like I don't think I was expecting to get the response to the book that I have gotten thus far. And so it's been like overwhelming, but in a really great way. And I'm like anticipating the conversation that'll come from it, and the good and the bad, and like what happens next. But it has been like really, really, really like a joyous time in the last couple of days. I feel like this is literally my second birthday, and I just had a birthday like 3 weeks ago. So it's like, it's giving.
It's a whole summer of birthdays. Come on.
Right.
A Cancer that makes you.
That's right.
All right. And a Leo for a book. That's a good combo.
It's a good combo, right? Thank you. The girls don't see it, but I do.
I see the vision. I'm a Leo. I get along with Cancers. We know how we do. We are good, the summer month birthday kids. We all different. We gotta stick together. Well, Deshaun, I'm wondering, would you please bless us with just like reading a little bit so we can just hear a little bit of this book before we dive in and talk about what it offers?
Yes, of course. So I'm going to read a couple pages of chapter 2, which is titled Pretty Ugly, The Politics of Desire. If you have like the physical copy in front of you, I'm going to start on page 13 and I'm going to end on page 16. I had to look at it to make sure I was telling the truth. That's the truth. Desirability politics is the methodology through which the sovereignty of those deemed conventionally attractive/beautiful is determined. Put another way, the politics of desire labels that which determines who gains and holds both social and structural power through the affairs of sensuality, often predicated on anti-Blackness, anti-Fatness, trans-misogynoir, cis-sexism, queer antagonism, and all other structural violence. It is intended to name the social, political, and economic capital one obtains/is given access to through their ability to be desired. By this, I mean that desire is about much more than being desired. It is about one's ability to always already be positioned as the very embodiment of the things that makes one desirable. For this reason, when talking about desire, I employ language like desirability politics, libidinal economy, and desire capital. More directly, they each speak to the structure and metaphysics of desire, beauty, prettiness, and ugliness, all with capitalized first letters, as things to be traded and saved as with any other economy. In this way, one can be insecure about how they appear or not feel pretty and still have access to beauty, desire, and prettiness. Insecurities are often taught as something to be afraid of, to be ashamed of, to run away from. People are taught that the way they feel about their bodies is their own moral failing and therefore their own responsibility to hold. We are all often socialized into believing that if we are insecure, then we are weak, incapable, or ugly, and that all of those things are bad things to be. Many internalize that, especially those who exist furthest on the margins, like the Black fat. But what if insecurities are worth embracing, particularly for the Black fat? What if insecurities are not a moral failing of the individual, but rather an inadvertent critique of a society that seeks to punish, harm, and abuse ugly people who dare to name that their perceived flaws are only named as such because of anti-Blackness? In many ways, and in other words, insecurities are a response to the violences ugly people are forced to endure. Ugly being capitalized U. And so often the people deemed ugly are fat, Black, and trans, people who are positioned outside the scope of desire and are thus faced with hypercriminalization and other violences against their being. Insecure is an adjective. It is a word intended to describe or name a characteristic of a person, place, or thing, otherwise known as a noun. Insecurity is a noun. It is intended to name a state of being, a response to a possibility of danger. While insecure does the job of classifying one's perceived negative feelings about their body and being, insecurity seeks to name the response to having no protection, the response to being harmed. It lights the path to what leads ugly people to feeling unsafe, unconfident, and uncared for. On the Politics of Ugliness, Nina A.K., I'm going to pronounce their last name as, gives a comprehensive summation of ugliness as a politic, wherein she lays out the history of the ugly/beautiful dichotomy in art history, literature, and aesthetic theory. In that same collection, editors Ella and Sarah write, ugliness or unsightliness is much more than a quality or property of an individual's appearance. It has long functioned as a social category that demarcates access to social, cultural, and political spaces and capital. And that our aesthetic, political, economic, sexual, and social discomfort with ugliness even affects and effects our relationship to and dislike of ugly spaces, ugly buildings, dilapidation, and disrepair. In Saving Face, Disfigurement, and the Politics of Appearance, Heather Lane Talley notes that ugliness matters for us all, but it particularly matters for those with bodies deemed as ugly, and that ugliness in itself becomes a way for barring a person's access to status, work, and love, functioning as an absence of capital. Persons and bodies refer more specifically to people who are marginalized by race, class, disabilities, fatness, age, and gender. As such, ugly is political. It is the determiner for who does and does not work, who does and does not receive love, who does and does not die, who does and does not eat, who is and is not housed. The only logical step following the acceptance of ugly as political is that insecurity too must be political. If the politicization of ugly leads to the social, political, economic, and physical death of a person, they are bound to feel unprotected, uncared for, and unconfident. To that point, insecurities are valid. It is okay for us to be insecure in bodies that are constantly beat on and berated. Those insecurities don't change the reality of what anti-fatness or overall ugliness is and what it does. In fact, those insecurities better contextualize it. Insecurities are not a personal indictment. They are an indictment of the world. Being that this is the case, people deemed ugly should run toward insecurity, not as a trauma to inform their politics, as it is dangerous to navigate the world of politics through trauma rather than an informed praxis, but as a political tool that aids in developing their understanding of and relationship to oppressive power structures. The world is set up in this way. To be ugly is to be a monster. To be a monster is to be the slave. To be the slave is to be the other. To be the other is to be undesirable. And to be undesirable is to be the beast. A metaphysical, ontological chain to pieces of flesh never intended to navigate this reality. And while ugly people may not have control over that, what they do control is the ability to reclaim and redefine the meanings of these words. They can learn ugliness and insecurity more intimately as parts of who they are, particularly and especially under the imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy, words of bell hooks. And I will end there. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. You better break that shit all the way down, right?
Please.
I love thinking about the embrace of insecurities. I love, it makes me think, that takes me to your third chapter where you really take health through its paces, right? And I think the book does that, right? It's like, no, because I think you do a very, not gentle, but clear and honest, let's talk about what body positivity movements do. Let's talk about what self-care, self-love movements do, and how they might do us some good, but they're limited, right? So instead, let's talk about ugly and its uses, or rather what ugly is in relationship to who we be. Let's talk about let's bring in insecurities. Let's not run from it. Let's not shame them, but let's think about what they teach us, their utility, right? Yes. Let's not look at health as some goal. Let's actually talk about how health was this thing created to keep us the fuck out, right? Created an antithesis of us, right? And so it's beautiful because it takes on its title, right? You have this formulation of the beast. The belly of the beast, right, is really saying, I'm taking everything you throw on me and at me, and yes, cannibalizing it, motherfucker.
Oh, I love it.
I'm wondering how, just as a writer in your process, because I know you also do on the ground work, on the ground in terms of in person and on the internet on the ground. What was it like for you to take all this in? Because I will say this seems like a hard collection, a hard study to pull together as a writer and researcher. What kept you buoyed, and who were you reaching towards as you were taking all this in?
This is why I asked you to be a conversation partner. You're so good. I love this question. I think first, yes, it was really hard. I was writing this book in the middle of 2020. I don't have to say anything else. In the middle of 2020, I was working 2 jobs. I was organizing. We were doing mutual aid work. The uprisings were happening. All these things were happening at one time. So it was very hard. And I love this question because I don't often reflect on what's grounding me to be able to sort of get through these type of things. But I think that there was a number of people and things that helped me sort of navigate this whole process. And I think some of that was, some of my closest friends who were allowing me to bounce ideas off of them and to work through my own politics and my own thoughts and concerns about the book and about what I was writing and about what it would read as for people who don't know me or don't know my work or not familiar with my work. I think like that was one of the biggest things for me was sort of like getting away from being somebody who has built an audience who's familiar with their essays and getting into writing a book where it will be in the world for a lot of people who don't know who I am, who don't know who the fuck I am, don't know what the fuck I write about, but know that they saw this picture or they read the back of the book and they were interested. And so I wanted to like find a way to be able to make what I'm saying make sense to everybody. And so like being able to talk to my closest friends and do that was helpful. Being able to like work with a publishing house, shout out to North Atlanta Books, that allowed me like to push back the deadline 2 months was like beneficial, because my ass did not write for like a month and a half that whole process. Cause I was in the streets. I was like literally organizing and doing so much at one time. And I couldn't finish the chapter, specifically chapter 4, which is the one on policing, in the midst of all that's happening with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. And so it was like a culmination of things and people who really supported me and lifted me up and helped me. But I also want to name that like, it was the fact that the book had not been written. I think that was the biggest thing for me. It was like, I know in my heart how important this is. I know how many people are counting on this book. I've been talking about it for so long, and so many, particularly fat Black folks, have been talking about like how much the book was needed, how much they needed that resource in their lives. So it was that for me. It was like there are people who are counting on this book, and it doesn't feel like a pressure that's undoable. It feels like I have to do this because people need it. And I also have to do this because I need it. Literally today, I ordered my own book. I ordered it, and it got to the house today, and I signed it, but I signed it to my younger self who needed this book, who needed to be able to read something like this to know that their experience wasn't theirs alone. So I think like that was all that was grounding me in that moment last year, because last year was hard.
Amen. I'm wondering though, that's a lot of, I feel like, you know, like really that is the thing, right? You write the books that you wish you saw in the world, right? I think that's a value that I think a lot of us are are hopefully lucky to hear at some point. Right? You'll see the shit, right? But what did you do with that sort of pressure or responsibility? How did that augment? Because you're writing a book, but it's your book.
Right.
And I guess do you see how does that maybe transform how you see the collection, or how you see the book, the collection of essays, the text, however you want to call it, right? How does that responsibility, how did that augment your writing process? And I guess, is there anything that you felt like you had to forfeit in order to make the book that you think you needed, that maybe we'll see later as you write more things?
Maybe so. I guess really like, maybe not forfeit, but just how did it drive you as you continue to think like many people? No, I like the question. I'm like, I think the answer to that is like, I had to, it sort of like threw me into writing in a good way, because I don't know if you experience this too, but I get in this sort of place where, and I don't call it writer's block, but where I just like, and it's also not necessarily depression. It's like, I just don't feel like writing. And maybe it's because what I'm writing is too heavy, or maybe it's because like what I'm experiencing is too heavy, or maybe it's just because I just don't feel like it. I don't know. But writing like for a living, as opposed to writing just because it's your passion, sort of completely shifts your relationship to writing. And so it was like at a moment in time last year, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do this. I'm going to like maybe try to work my ass off to pay back the first half of this advance, because I just don't think I can do this. But having that pressure on my shoulders felt like it pushed me. It forced me into writing. And that was what I used to actually sit down in front of my laptop and do it. So it was like, as hard as it was, and as much as I'm sure some people would argue that shouldn't be like the conditions you write under, it was necessary for me because there would not be a book without that pressure.
Word. Okay, usefulness. I love that, the usefulness. It's almost a responsibility.
Yes.
In a way. I'm wondering. Okay, so you start off the book so beautifully. I love the acknowledgments up front. Even just as just as a researcher, I think even how you both highlight and also speak back to and argue with the different thinkers in your work feels like an act of love. And I want to know if you could just name any ancestors, elders, or peers who were transformative in your thoughts as you started to build this book that is, just such a I think you're right. It is a gathering of these fields of Black studies, fat studies, and just gender studies, and really it is a kiss to that community, and like a revolutionary, necessary like kiss, and let's go beat up some motherfuckers kiss. But who's thinking, whose words or just whose care was transformative to you in this process?
Yes. So the first person I always have to name is Toni Morrison, because her quote, the quote around writing the book that you want to see in the world that hasn't been written, was the reason why I chose to write the book. So I always have to name her because like I was really, really, really inspired by that quote. And it pushed me to write this book. And then I always make sure that I want to name the people who like blurbed the book, like Kiese and Sabrina Strings and Hunter and Sharonda, because all four of them inspire me a lot, and have continuously inspired like my train of thought, how I arrive to a conclusion, and have in different ways like informed my work. So I always give a shout out to them, and am like deeply appreciative of the way that they write and move through their thoughts, but also that they thought enough of this book to blurb it. And then I always give a shout out to like my best friend Jatella, who I think is absolutely brilliant, and who I have thought through a lot of these concepts with, along with Raw and T and Ebony and Rainice and August and Christelle. So many of my friends whose names people may not recognize, may not know, but who are downright brilliant people that because of their community, I'm able to produce something like this book. I think like I did an interview the other day where I was asked a very similar question, and I named you, Danez, and like Elle, and I named like Nikki Giovanni and a few other folks like who I think I'm like Daniel Black and folks who I'm really inspired by in the ways that you manipulate and use language. I think that like y'all are so brilliant in the way that like you're able to form words and form sentences and create language in a way that just feels so authentic to you. That's one of my favorite things about your book, Niggas, which is not what the white folks can call it. And I love it. So like those are just a few people. I know I'm like missing names, and I'm sorry to people who I'm missing, but those are like a good number of names of people who I'm like continuously inspired by, and whose thoughts I'm drawn to, and whose art I'm like always drawn to as well.
Wow. Well, I feel honored to be in that company. But it makes me wonder, like, even just hearing you say off those names, the like, the more poety side of the list. I know you're a poet, but two, it makes me wonder what else you're going to write, because I do feel like I could tell that you had a point to make reading this collection, and I wondered, I don't know if this is a question, maybe I'm just talking to you, but I wondered, because you do have such a poetic voice, not only just in your poetry, but even in like your tweets, or even in just like how to reference, like there is a voice there. And it makes me wonder, now that sort of this large like brick, like you ain't gonna tell me I'm not wrong because I decided my shit, collection of thought is out. It makes me wonder the other ways that thought and theory and art from this particular corner of your mind is going to evolve. Just as a fan of yours, I'm like, okay, what is the novel? You know, what's the novel look like? You know, what's the poetry collect? You know,
no, I mean, it might give, you know, at some point, maybe it might be given like a little fiction book. It might be given, I don't know, a romance novel. I have no idea, but I mean, yeah, you know, like I love poetry, and I am always trying to think through poetry. And you call me a poet, I call myself a person who's inspired by poetry. And yeah, I'm excited for whatever like that brings. I think that it would be cool to write something that's not theory. So we'll see.
We're gonna see it. You talked just so lovely, just a moment ago, hopping back. You talked so lovely about a lot of the folks in your community who like really helped you formulate a lot of these ideas. And I know you have relationships with these folks offline, but it also is so beautiful to watch the way I think you think online. Both in community and sometimes against people, because you also deal with a lot of foolishness online. But I'm wondering, how has online community and dialogue played into your work, played into your thinking? Can you maybe walk us through something that you can think through? Like, this is an idea of mine that I can only credit to being online. And I'm wondering, has the online, just, you know, Twitter and all these spaces, has it been a useful community for you to find other folks who are thinking about fatness and blackness and gender in ways, right? Because if this book is to fill a gap, I guess, is that a way that you found yourself being able to fill the gap in absence?
Oh my God, yes. I love this question. And yes, so like one of my really good friends who started off as online community and now is like in real life community, their name is Jay, is someone that I think through these thoughts with very often. And I think that they think of themselves as just a fan, but I'm like really like they are really a great friend and someone that I have been like so inspired by, and I think them along with like Mikey, along with Sydney Sky and Tatiana, a lot of like Black queer fat folks online who are like producing this work. I would not have gotten to a thought process to even think about writing Belly of the Beast without Twitter and without these folks in particular. So yes, like I didn't discover fat studies until 2017, and that was through Twitter. That was initially it was just like you know, like a more general part of the fat studies canon. So a lot of the people who I discovered were like white cis women and white queer folks and white trans folks, but they were still very pivotal in my like sort of creating a relationship with fat studies. And then I found all these fat Black folks online who were producing like thoughts and language and content in a way that I thought was just so special. And it made me want to, you know, add more thought to what I was already thinking through. And that is what led me here. So yes, I will say that online has been very important, so much so that I don't think I would have, I maybe would have written a book, but it would not have been this. It would not have been this book. And I don't think it would have been one nearly as groundbreaking as this one. And I'm saying that as humbly as I can.
No, you better say that. My shit broke the ground. You better say that. So now, okay. I got a couple more questions for you. So I guess I'm just wondering about even just your own like growth in yourself as a thinker. I think Beyond Abolition as a final essay is just such a strong argument. I love you saying that we must go beyond the destruction of these institutions, right? Because when left inside of the same society, something equally evil will respawn, will replace it, right? And I know that you are maybe like, you know, a recovering HBCU Morehouse grad, right? A recovering recovering Democrat, maybe, you know, all these things. I voted with Obama with glee. And I'm wondering if you could walk us through maybe your journey into and then looking beyond abolition. What were maybe pivotal moments or texts or experiences that sort of led you to this place where you're just saying, we have to destroy it all, truly?
Yes. Yes. So I arrived here because I've been organizing now for nearly a decade. And I've been a part of many orgs and many coalitions and many collaborations and lots of collaborative efforts and lots of cohorts and all these things that we create. And we've done a lot of amazing work. I would never, deny the brilliant work that we've been able to do and a lot of the wins that we've been able to pull off because of I think how great we were with what we did. But I think that because I've also been organizing for so long, and so many people have been organizing for much, much, much longer than that, and because we know that our ancestors have been organizing since they were forced on the boat. That's what all that we've been doing since we arrived here. I think that there's no way to know that truth and not acknowledge the fact that organizing then cannot be enough, or a destruction of an institution, which we have to acknowledge is not just a building, right? It's not just the structure, it's also an idea. Or not an idea, but because institutions are built off of ideas and power, just destroying the building itself it's not enough. It can't be enough. We've done all of that. We've seen the way that reform, even abolitionist reformist projects, have not been enough to free us. So where I arrive at is that if that's the truth, if that's the case, right, that doesn't mean we stop organizing. I think, in fact, we organize even more. But I think what it does mean is that we have to recognize and understand that what then comes at the end of that effort, what happens when we start to arrive at a place where we believe that abolition is being manifested, that can't be enough, right? Because a destruction of the institution alone, and by that I mean the structure, is not what destroys the idea. And so long as somebody still has power to implement an idea, they'll do it. And so I think it took me a while to get there. I did attend Morehouse. I did not graduate from Morehouse. I was there for 3 years. I will not get into that story. That might be in a memoir one day.
Ooh, all right, don't give it. All right, let him pay $16 for it.
I drag Morehouse every chance I get. But anywho, I did attend Morehouse. I started organizing there. I was a Democrat, all these things. And then I was introduced to more like radical ideas and thoughts, more revolutionary ideas and thoughts. That allowed me to become an abolitionist. And then as I got to this place, it was because I started reading folks like Dr. Joy James, who I think is brilliant in the way that she sort of moves with like an Afro-pessimist analysis while still organizing with the Panthers and around communism and socialism. I think that's brilliant. And that's exactly what I want to embody. And I became, closer friends with some of the folks I named earlier, like Jatella and Raw and T, who I think have also done very similar things, right? And so really what I'll say is that it was Black studies generally and Afro-pessimism more specifically that allowed me to arrive to this place. And I know that there are critiques that people have of Afro-pessimism, but I think that there is something very important about using an Afro-pessimist analysis along with the rest of our analysis. Like for me, that would be socialism, that sort of helps me ground the work that I'm doing in organizing in I think a more realistic praxis. Perhaps realistic is the wrong word, but in a better praxis. And so that's sort of how I arrived here and who I've been thinking with. And I'm always thinking through Afro-pessimism and Pan-Africanism and communism together. I think that it's important to do so. So that's sort of my little spiel.
I feel you on that though. I mean, if we could just talk about that, I feel like whenever whenever I see critiques of Afro-pessimism, and maybe I might be going beyond myself, but I don't see Afro-pessimism as a praxis necessarily. I see it as a lens of which your practice, right? So it's actually good that you're saying that, right? Like, I'm not going to, like, you know, it is like, what are my socialist practices? And I can bring this Afro-pessimist lens that, to me, the word, when you were searching for a word, the word that came up with me was like honest, right? Yeah. It doesn't sort of live in like this like false central, like centrist democratic hope.
Yeah.
BS, right? Afro-pessimism is like very Black and like this is what it is. It recognizes the metaphorical darkness of the world and the situation, right? And says we understand that the end game is to end us. Right. But let's couple with these other things to try to maybe slowly dig ourselves out of that hole.
Yeah, I think that literally, like, exactly that. And when you read folks like Sylvia Wynter and Saidiya Hartman and Hortense Spillers and all these people who are writing brilliant works, Jared Sexton and Fred Moten, I think when you read all these folks like who are either Afro-pessimists or are thinking with Afro-pessimism, there's no way to read that and not come to the same conclusion. I think I won't. That's not what the show is about. But yes,
Well, we got it. We're going to be getting into the Q&A. So, folks, if you're watching online, please, send your thoughts and your questions that way. But one more question. I just want to know. So, like, I think what I've been enjoying just from like my own auntie chair, just viewing this, is that like you release what is like a very critical text. You know, like we research, we have the notes. You know, like, but it's getting like pop album rollout, right? Like the photos, the photo shoots are giving Cardi B. You know, like we are really having like a moment, right? And you know, like let's say like, you know, like body positivity, like stop short, yeah, but like we're gonna serve body on this.
But we're gonna give body,
right? And I'm like, really, like, where's the album? When's the tour? You know, and like, because I just kind of want to know, one, what's it like to be that fine? And two, you know, I'll tell a little story. The first time me and Deshaun met is because I was thirsting on a selfie. They posted. I was like, I don't know who this is.
That's true.
But I'm in room 203. But no, what has it been like to, and like, you know, you serving it on the cover of the book as well. I'm just wondering, like, what has it been to bring your own beautiful self into the celebration of this book as well? How did the photo shoots go? Do you feel fine? Which one was your favorite?
I love it. Well, one, you don't have to ask me what it feels like to be this fine because you are, and you know this. The people, anyway. So that's number one. No. That's number one, because I've done more than enough thirsting over Danez as well. And the second answer is I loved it. The photo shoot. So all the photos I've released over the last like month or two were from one photo shoot. I did 3 different looks. It took 2 hours. It was a very stressful, very like eventful day, but it was fun. I had so much fun at that photo shoot. And yeah, I did. I felt fine as fuck, felt sexy as fuck, really enjoyed what I was able to bring to the camera and what the photographer was able to bring to me. And it was beautiful. I am ready to book him again because it was great. His name is Bakari, by the way. He's a photographer here in Atlanta. You absolutely should book him if you're here. He's so talented. And for like the book cover, that's a book that I took myself. It's a self-portrait that I took in Toronto in 2019. It was my first time, not only in Canada, but my first time out of the US, which I know like Toronto is like right there, but it's still out the US. And I was like so excited. And I don't know, whenever I'm in a hotel, I just feel like I have to take nudes. I have to. So it's like it's a rule of thumb. So I took this picture and I've been like in love with it ever since. And we were like searching for like sort of stock images that would like show off the fat Black body that's not like read as femme or feminine, because the book is about not that. So, and we couldn't find it. There was no stock images. And so every cover that I got, I was like, I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. But I knew I wanted a picture that didn't show a face necessarily, so that someone who doesn't know who I am can look at the image and be like, oh, that's me, and not in like a representation matters type of way, but like maybe this is something I should pick up because that looks like me. And so as like we sort of moved into that and started like thinking more about it, they were like, well, do you have any like sort of like tasteful artsy news that you would like to use? And I was like, baby, do I? And so I sent in like literally like seven images, and we came away with this one, and we made it black and white. And that became like what solidified the whole process, and that became the book cover.
Wow. I love that, Deshaun. I really think you're one of the few, I would say academics, but I'll just say maybe Black thinkers who are doing it in text, who I really feel like is found in the best traditions that Bell Hooks offered us, which is really just asking folks to engage with your work, with how they engage with poetry or with any type of story that holds knowledge and holds something that can save them lives. Thank you for that intention that you brought to this project. I think it is out there. And I think this book is going to change the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
For the thought you put into this, because we will benefit. All right, let's get into this Q&A. Hey, Shane.
Hey, Shane.
Such an amazing conversation, and I love how much we got to talk about nudes. Yep, because that's a huge part of the queer community.
In so many ways, it really is.
Mm-hmm. So we do have several questions from the audience, but we have plenty of time. And if you are watching, and I know you are because we have a great audience here tonight, type up your questions now, and we will have time to get to those. So let's start with a question. Well, actually, I want to start with some comments. So Danny says, "This is so dope. Thank you so much for this conversation." Your friend Jamila is here. Jatella, sorry. Yeah. Jatella's here saying, "I love you, Deshaun." So yeah, really great, very supportive audience. I'm so happy that they're here. And we will now go to the question from Anna. So Anna's asking, what is needed from, and these are all capitalized, pretty, beautiful, desirable people, especially considering capital U ugliness is as representative of an absence of much needed capital?
Yeah. I got asked a very similar question last night, and I'm just going to give the same answer. So I wrote an article last summer in the midst of the uprisings. My audience is typically always Black folks, so very rarely do I write to white people. But in this one instance, like I wrote this essay because I think there was like a lot of sort of chatter about what white folks could do in this moment. And so I gave off a list. It was a list of 3 things: give resources to people, pay people, right, and be willing to give up your life. Those are the 3 things that are required from people who are like seated in positions of power over other folks. And so what that means is, like, in the context of last year, if folks are in the middle of the streets protesting and police are like antagonizing them, shooting at them, and you have a home to welcome them into the home, right? Like, house folks in this way, give folks money, give organizations money, and also take yourself to the streets. Put your own body on the line on the behalf of folks who are marginalized in a way that you are not. And so I apply those same 3 sort of like rules to this context. I think it matters that folks are willing to not only learn about the experiences of other folks, but to sort of adopt like that line of thinking that invites them into welcoming the difference in experiences and shifting the way that they think through those experiences, so that they are, one, able to build relationship with folks who do not look like them, who are not like them, who are politically ugly, and also are willing then to put their own body on the line, and or offer resources to folks who are not experiencing like benefits from existing under desirability.
One of my questions that I want to kind of quickly fit this in, since that very much brought up the caps versus no caps.
Yes.
A lot of the queer community and the Black community have a really insightful way of creating language that fits and that kind of has the usefulness of language and the ability to make it work in ways that it hasn't previously. And I want to know what your, like, how much of that is yours and how much of that comes from previous kind of, that's my own curiosity.
Around the like capitalization of words.
Yeah.
So that sort of comes from like the relationship that I have with my best friend Jatella, who introduced me to like social death theory. And a lot of times when people write about social death, the D in death is capitalized to signify like a metaphysical ontological violence that's at play, so that people, you know, are like living as socially dead. And so I sort of adopted that I guess like aesthetic or rule to be able to write through the way that institutions like or these sort of modes of oppression like prettiness and beauty benefit people in a particular way, even if they don't believe themselves to be that or don't feel that they show up in that way, sort of to write the difference between a feeling and an embodiment. And that's sort of where that came from.
Wow, thank you. The Closet Unlocked is asking, how did you know when you were at the end of Belly of the Beast, finished with your thoughts or point that you wanted to share? And that's from Darius.
First of all, hey, Darius, I'm excited about our interview. That's a good question. I think I knew that I was finished with the book when I got to the chapter that's now known as Beyond Abolition, and I didn't have anything else to say. I wanted to write a book that, one, wasn't super, super long or full of like bullshit and language that wasn't necessary or fluff and whatnot, because for one, we're in a pandemic and people don't want to read anyway. And so I wanted people to feel like they could be comfortable enough to like actually read the book and not feel like intimidated. And so when I finished Beyond Abolition, and I got to the end of that, I believe I end that chapter with a quote from Maya Angelou, or at least I like am thinking with her quote at the end of that chapter. And when I got there, I was like, oh, I'm finished. Like, I don't have anything else to say. And I think that this is a perfect ending to the book because it does what I wanted to do, which was combine theory with this sort of like imagery, this sort of like poetic way of writing that I like to write with. And I think it did both beautifully. So I was like, I think this is it for me. That's how I ended it.
Sierra's asking, still slowly reading, so sorry if this is in the text. Was there a seminal text or specific life experience that made you realize your thesis on health as the antithesis of Black life? And that's paraphrased.
Yes and no. So the closest thing to that I use in the chapter is Sabrina Strang's Fearing the Black Body. She does talk about this a bit in that book. And it was like, it was brilliant to me. And I use that, I cite that in that chapter. But for the most part, it was mostly just me thinking through what it looks like for Black folks to be asked to want to embody something that is built on anti-Blackness, right? If the origin of this language and the thing that this language is built around is false disabilities that were created with the intent to keep folks enslaved, what reason do we have to try to embody this like this as a way of being, as a way of living? There's no way to, if this is what our institutions are built on. And so when I thought through that, and I thought through that with the work of Sabrina Strings, it was just sort of a no-brainer to me. It was like, well, this feels obvious. It's like, where else do we go from here besides this? And that's how I got there.
We have a couple more minutes, so if anyone else has any questions, be sure to type those up. I want to mention that we are 7 years, 3 days away from the murder of Michael Brown, mere miles away from where I currently am, mentioned in chapter 4, which is a very difficult read and very important and critical. So thank you for writing it, because it is necessary and to understand. I'm getting emotional again, but I want to thank you for writing that and for writing this book, like for putting all of this emotional labor into it, because you do have several moments in the book that are very personal and like, which makes me want a memoir from you. Like I would love to hear more of your story, but I want to know how you balanced, or how you were able to so delicately balance your own story with this like theory and kind of academia.
Yeah. It was difficult. I was like trying to, because the books that I'm citing in this book are mostly academic, but then some are not. And I'm also citing like articles and that are not academic journals. So I was like really trying to think through how these books were written, how like the books that I'm citing were written, while also trying to be true to who I am as a writer. And who I am as a writer is not somebody who is heavily like into writing with like academic language or using this language as like a way to write. And so I wanted to be honest about the fact that I'm writing theory and I'm creating something in that way, but also that didn't remove me completely from the text. And that's how I arrived there. So in most of the book, you don't see me using like I statements or I language. But then there are certain parts where that was necessary, not only to invite myself back into the text, but also because so much about this book is like so under-researched that it required that I use my own experiences or experiences from other people to be able to build on top of the theory that was being created. So it was like sort of a culmination of things that allowed me to create all that I was trying to do in that moment, while still being true to myself.
One last question from, I don't know if I know how to pronounce it, Borish. Borish. Okay. Is asking, what advice do you have for those who know this world must end, but still feel tethered to it or too scared to let it go?
I'll let you know when I get there. I think like I'm living in the in between of that, right? I think so many of us are, if we're honest with ourselves. We know that the world has to end, and yet it is all we know. It's all we have ever known. We don't know anything else. We don't know what came before, and we don't know what comes next. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with feeling uncertain or having moments of uncertainty. When it comes to that, I think if I was like asking the author of this book, which I guess I am, I would go with what I said in chapter 2 by embracing that insecurity, by embracing that uncertainty. I think that it will allow us to arrive somewhere else together, and allow us to exist in, I guess, a more honest space with ourselves and with others. So my answer to that is that I don't think there's anything wrong with feeling like you're tethered to this world, with being unsure about what it means to end the world in a moment where that's all that you are, that you've ever known, and yet it has to happen, right? So we build community with people who understand that, and we create space for that truth, and we move however the collective chooses to move, I think. Yeah.
Tim is saying bring on the memoir, and I want to put a vote in for the romance, because I feel like the world needs that. Like,
and we want nasty. We want Zach.
Oh yeah.
Okay. We want sisterhood of the APF, but
please,
well,
to be clear, if I write a romance novel, it would be nothing short of the ones that our mamas used to read, used to have on the bookshelves. The Black
coffee. I know them books. My mama used to make me go to the library to check them out for her.
Right. No, literally, it would be nothing short of that. I don't know if that will ever happen, by the way, but if it does, it will have to be nasty because I'm writing it. And the memoir might come. I'm considering it. I think, we are in a moment right now where everyone's releasing memoirs, and that's, okay. But I wanted to write something else, which is why I wrote this. But the memoir might come. It might be quite a few of them, actually, because there's a lot.
I mean, the world needs this book right now, and thank you. It is.
Thank you.
I want to thank you both for this incredible conversation. Audience, if you're watching and thought this conversation was as significant as I did, be sure to share this conversation. You can share on YouTube, share on Facebook. Make sure that more people watch this, because I think that everyone in the world should watch this conversation that you had tonight.
Thank you.
Really, just amazing. I do want to thank the audience for being here tonight. Really, yeah.
No, thank you to you, Shane, for hosting us. Thank you, Danez, for agreeing to be my conversation partner. Thank you to the audience for joining us. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who's bought the book so far. I appreciate that a lot.
The rest of y'all, go buy it, go get it from the library, go steal it from a bookstore you don't like. Work at the Amazon,
not the ones, the corporations.
But the corporate ones, yes. Not the little bookstores, but if you work in the Amazon warehouse, steal 20.
But also, I need some coins. So,
And, girl, you ain't getting no Amazon coin. We could have a conversation.
No, but yes, do all of that. Tell your mama, your granddaddy, your grandpapa, your MX, all of them. Tell everybody.
And congrats to you, Deshaun, on this book.
Thank you, baby. I appreciate it.
All right.
Have a good night.